This episode of Hitch to Homicide deals with the subject of rape and murder of minor children. Listener discretion is advised.
January 15th, 1985, Aurora, Colorado. Bruce and Debra Bennett, along with their 2 daughters, are in bed for the night when a brutal murderer and assailant bludgeoned them all with a hammer. But this attack wasn't the first for this killer, and it wouldn't be his last. In fact, it would take 34 years before he would be brought to justice for the murder of the Bennett family. He was an opportunist, a thrill killer, and an unknown in a very cold case for far too long. This is the story of Alex Ewing, the Hammer Killer. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Potter. Welcome to Hitch to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for our friends over there in Spain.
Spain.
Bienvenido.
I thought it was hola. Oh, that's hello, not welcome. Come on, Chris.
Hola, ¿qué tal?
I did not take Spanish.
Or, as we say here in Kentucky, ¿qué tal, y'all?
Well, wherever you're listening, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Then like, rate, and review the podcast so other people who are just like you can find us. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below.
Yep.
You can find us on Instagram at Hitch to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. And if you want true crime every single day of the week, please go join our closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and Outlaws. Go to Facebook, type in H2H In-Laws and Outlaws. All you got to do is answer a couple questions and you're in. Please go join.
Come on in. The water's warm.
I post photos and other information in there. It's a great group of folks. We love each other a whole lot, and we make each other laugh a lot. Very supportive.
We do.
We also now have a Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to send Rob some coffee. He drinks it during every single episode. I had to wait before I started today so he could go fill his coffee cup up. You can find that link in our show notes as well. And you can now send us a text. And the link to that is at the top of the show notes where it says, send Chris and Rob a text. We're getting some good ones.
Yeah, we appreciate them. We
very much do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this case, it's a big time cold case. It was finally solved and finished
right,
just about 2.5 years ago.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Okay.
Before we get started, let me thank some sources. People Magazine Investigates, The Denver Post, 104.3 in Denver, NBC Channel 9 News in Denver, Find a Grave, Oxygen Channel, ABC Channel 7 in Denver, and lawandcrime.com.
All right. Well, you ready?
I am.
Let's do it.
Alex Christopher Ewing is born on August 14th, 1960 at Marine Corps Air Station Cherry Point, North Carolina.
Yeah, North Carolina.
This is a base located in Havelock, North Carolina. And today there are about 16,000 active duty plus family members who live there. His father was military, and we know he has at least one brother. But beyond that, his early life is kind of a mystery.
Okay.
Alex was a high school dropout where he lived in Sacramento, California. Now, how the family made it from North Carolina to Sacramento, I don't know.
Wagon train.
And then he
Sorry.
And then he drifted around for a while. So by my best guesstimation, he was supposed to graduate in 1978, but dropped out. And by 1979, he's committed his first burglary. He'll have a string of arrests for the next few years, but he hadn't murdered anybody. That part we know.
All right.
In 1983, he moves to the Denver, Colorado area and begins working in construction. And the areas of Aurora and Lakewood, Colorado, were both booming with all these new housing developments. Now, I want you to meet some people.
Okay.
Kim and Jim Hobbenshields were two of those people who bought a new home in that area. Kim and Jim are living in Aurora, Colorado, which is about 10 miles east of Denver. They're a very young married couple at the time. They're really, really happy. They were so excited to go from renting to owning their own home. Nothing like walking through the door of your very first home that you purchase.
I remember it well.
They moved into the house in August of 1984, and they had a new puppy. Now, they are very young because Kim is only 21. On January 4th, 1984, Jim is up late making, and I thought this was funny, a mixed tape. I've made lots of those in my day.
I remember those.
But Kim had gone to bed at midnight. Sounds like Rob staying up late working. Chris is in bed. But when Jim finally comes to bed, and I'm not blaming this on Jim, so don't get me wrong here. In their new house, they had a garage, but they didn't have a garage door opener, and they had to physically open and close the garage. I can remember doing this before garage door openers, I think, were invented.
Yeah.
I was like the youngest, so we'd get to the garage, and it would be like, Chris, get out and open the garage.
It's like the old TV remotes. What's an old TV remote? The youngest kid.
The youngest kid, yeah. But their garage had to be opened and closed manually. And on that particular night, nobody closed the garage door.
Oops.
And Jim comes to bed without checking it. Now, before we move any further, I just want to tell you, when I was first married and in my very first home that we had bought together, this is me and my late husband, he went for a run, came home, didn't shut the garage door, and we had a garage door opener. And he was from a small town, and we went to bed, and we're in bed, turn out the lights, and all of a sudden I hear thud. And I said, what is that? And he gets out of bed and starts running, goes, I know exactly what it is. And we opened the door just in time to see his car making the turn at the end of the street. Our car had been stolen out of our garage.
Yep.
Crazy. Shut your garage. If I have anything to say about this case, close your garage every night and lock the door in between your garage and your mudroom or your kitchen or wherever it comes into your home.
It's the last thing I always check before I come to bed.
We do. We check this. But we don't leave the keys in our cars either. So, yeah. But Jim comes to bed without checking it. And the door from the garage to the house isn't locked. In the middle of the night, Kim wakes up in incredible pain. She has this incredible pain on the top of her head, and she sits up and she can see in the night the silhouette of a man standing at the foot of her bed, and he is wielding a hammer.
Wow.
Rob, what is my biggest fear?
Somebody standing at the edge of the bed when you wake up. Yeah.
I mean, this would have been like a whole new fear unlocked for me because he's wielding a hammer.
Yeah. When I come to bed at night after you've been asleep, I usually do a military crawl on the floor.
Does not. He does lies. All lies. These are all lies.
No, they're not.
But he's standing at the bed, he's wielding this hammer, he lifts up the hammer, and she screams, quote, Jim, there's a man in the house throwing hammers, end quote. And she screams again, and this shadowy figure threw the hammer at her from the end of the bed, and he ran out of the house.
Wow.
Now, Jim gets out of the bed, and he starts running after him, but he couldn't catch him. And Kim calls 911, and she thinks she's like wiping sweat out of her brow, but it's not. It's blood.
Wow.
And Jim has also been hit in the head. He's bleeding as well. So she calls 911. The Aurora police arrive along with EMTs. They start tending to the two of them. Kim was hit once, but Jim had a skull fracture, and Kim's blood pressure was sky high, couldn't get it down. Understandably so.
Yeah.
She's in shock, I'm sure. Detective Steve Connor and Detective Marvin Brandt of the Aurora Police Department are on the scene, and they walk the house, and they see that there's no forced entry, but that the garage door was open, and the door to the house from the garage is unlocked. They dusted for fingerprints, and they search the house, and what they find is a bloody claw hammer in the bedroom.
Okay.
There are no prints in the house or on the hammer. Police go to the hospital. They're going to ask Kim and Jim some questions. Can you give a description? What about his build? How tall was he?
Right.
How big was he? And Kim tells them, no, he was just a shadowy figure. She didn't see a face. And they ask if they have any enemies. And Kim says, no.
Yeah.
Back at the crime scene, police are wondering if the perpetrator just lived nearby. So they track some footprints in the snow. It's January in Colorado, after all.
Sure.
And they track them to a neighbor's home, to their patio. But that's kind of where they end. They come off the patio and then they sort of end. Okay. So he never entered that house, but it makes me think that maybe he thought about entering that house.
Sure.
What police do find is Kim's purse. It had been rummaged through and tossed outside in the snow. The cash was missing from the purse, but really nothing else. And when Kim and Jim get home from the hospital the next day, they're shown the hammer. And they tell police, that's not our hammer. Wow. So if he came through the garage, he didn't grab our hammer.
Right.
He brought his own.
BYOH.
Bring your own hammer. And he did. Patricia Louise Combs Smith is moving to Lakewood, Colorado, with her daughter, Sherry, and her 2 grandchildren. Patricia was born on September 19th, 1933, in Pierre, South Dakota. I don't think I've ever talked about anybody from South Dakota.
Does anybody live in South Dakota?
Apparently they do, because Patricia was from there.
No, I've been through South Dakota. It's beautiful.
Have you really?
Yeah. Yep,
I'd love to go to the Dakotas. Is it like Yellowstone? No, that's Montana.
Yeah, it's Montana. No, it's a beautiful state.
I'm terrible. I get out west and I'm like, that's a square. I need to know my geography better.
Well, when I was in my 20s, I drove cross country with some buddies of mine from San Francisco all the way. Well, I stopped in Ohio, but they went to New Jersey. And
that sounds just absolutely horrible.
It was a long drive.
That sounds awful to me.
When you're in your 20s and you're with your buddies, though, it was fun.
Yeah, I don't know. I could have been, I could have been at any age, and it doesn't sound fun.
It was fun.
But Patricia is in South Dakota. She's born in South Dakota. She marries a World War II vet. His name was Oliver Smith Jr. in 1953. He was from Nebraska. And this is where she would live and raise her family. Now, from what I gather by all the records, she divorces Oliver, and after her daughter Sherry also gets a divorce, these 2 women move to a brand new townhome in Lakewood, Colorado for a fresh start. And Sherry is bringing her 2 children with her, a girl and a boy, 6 and 4.
Okay.
Now, Patricia was an interior designer. She was very pretty. She was very successful, and she had clients all over Colorado. She's 50 years old. She's a young grandmother. Mm-hmm. She loves these grandchildren and her daughter so much. She was like a strong, independent woman. She was just like the modern woman all the way back in 1984.
Right.
Every morning, Patricia would drop Sherry off at the park and ride so she could catch the bus to her place of work, and then she would come back later in the day and pick her up in the exact same spot. And when Patricia drops Sherry off, she tells her daughter, I'm going to run a few errands today. It's January 10th, 1985. It's just 6 days after Kim and Jim have been assaulted in Aurora.
Okay.
Patricia drops off her daughter. I'm assuming that Patricia worked from home at that time.
Right.
They were brand new to the area and in their brand new townhome.
Right.
But around lunchtime that day, Patricia went outside the home and the garage door was open. And maybe she was leaving the house, but then went back in for just a moment before leaving again, because her daughter has said she would never leave the garage door just wide open.
Right.
But when Patricia walks back into the house through the front door, she's immediately and brutally attacked. She's bludgeoned in the head. Now, eventually, she was going to be hit 17 times in the head.
Wow.
Then just 6 feet from the front door, her blouse is ripped off and her bra and shirt are pushed up to her neck before she is sexually assaulted. Now, if he has hit her in the head 17 times, there's no way she's alive for this.
Right. Yeah.
When her killer is finished, he leaves her legs open. He covers her face with a Winnie the Pooh blanket that belonged to Patricia's granddaughter. And at the end of the day, Sherry's back waiting for her mom to pick her up at the park and ride, but her mom never shows. Patricia never shows. So she calls her cousin to come and pick her up because she needs to go pick up her 2 kids at daycare.
Right.
And when they arrive back at the townhouse, the curtains in the house are open, and Sherry can see a television flickering through the window upstairs. And the garage door was open, but downstairs, the lights are off. Now, her 2 kids are really quick to jump out of the car and just run for the front door to get in, right?
Yeah.
No lights on in the house downstairs. And Sherry meets up with the kids at the front door, and she turns on the light and she sees her mother lying in the floor covered in blood.
Yeah.
She can see her mother's clothes had been removed, and next to her mom's head, covered in blood by the blanket, there's just a pool of blood everywhere.
Oh, man.
All 3 of them run next door. They call 911. Sherry tells the police, "My mother's been killed." And the police arrive, and when they take the blanket from Patricia's face, they find a bloody hammer next to her head. It's a hammer that you would use on a car, an auto body hammer.
Okay.
And I had to look up what that looked like. I had to see a picture of this.
Yeah, it's got a flat face on it.
It does. There's blood on the floor, on the linoleum floor. There's blood by the front door. There's blood everywhere. There's cast off everywhere. But her killer was waiting for her inside that front door. Now, inside Patricia's bedroom, the contents of her purse is emptied. It's everywhere. All of her cash is gone, but really not much else. When they search the house, they see that there's no forced entry. And Sherry tells them that when they arrived, that the garage door was open. Now, when the coroner does the autopsy, he notes the 17 wounds to her head with this hammer, and he takes swabs from her body. Now, remember, she's been sexually assaulted. It's 1984, so no DNA.
Right.
Yet, on this same day, January 10th, 1984, 25 miles away and back in Aurora, Colorado, he's about to strike again. The killer's about to strike again.
Wow.
Donna Dixon is a flight attendant for Frontier Airlines. This little girl, she's adorable. And while she's working as a flight attendant, she meets pilot Ron Holm. And this guy, Ron, he just thought she was the bee's knees. I have seen interviews with them, and they are just the cutest little couple. They kind of remind me of us, Rob.
Because we're the bee's knees.
You thought I was the bee's knees.
I still do.
But they're just very sweet and funny. And I was like, oh, I just love this little couple. From what I found in my research, Ron tried to get Donna to go out with him for maybe 2 years.
Oh, wow.
He thought she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. And I think he first asked her to play tennis. And he said the reason for that was because he was a really good tennis player.
Smart man.
And then he asked her to go play racquetball, which stands to reason. If you're good at tennis, you're good at racquetball.
Sure.
And again, she says no. But he finally just asked her out for a drink, and she said yes. And it was because she didn't like athletics.
So he was barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah. But these two fall in love, and by January of 1984, they've moved in together into Ron's brand new condo on a cul-de-sac. And on January 10th, 1984, Donna had the day off, and Ron was in the air. And these two never crossed paths on that day. Donna went to the grocery, and on her way home, she stopped at the mailbox for the cul-de-sac. So it was one of those all addresses get, delivered to one central location. You take your key.
Yep.
You've seen those before.
The big box.
Yeah, it's like a big box.
Yeah.
And so she stops at that, and she gets their mail. When she gets to the condo, she opens the garage. Her garage door is closed. She opens the garage door. She pulls her car inside and turns off the ignition. She removes her keys from the ignition. The same key ring holds the key to her house. And she opens the door to her car and is immediately hit in the temple with a hammer.
Oh, man.
The assailant grabs her and pulls her out of the car through the passenger door and onto the concrete, where he sexually assaults her and leaves her for dead. Like he has put a hole in the side of her temple.
Jeez.
Now, it's very cold out. Again, it's January in Colorado.
Right.
And Donna lays there for hours unconscious. And when she wakes up, she's so disoriented from her head trauma, she doesn't remember or know what's happening. She finds her way into her house somehow, and she keeps throwing up because of this head trauma.
Sure.
And all she can think is that she's had too much to drink, like she was drunk, and that's why she was dizzy and disoriented and throwing up.
Yeah.
And finally, she just lays down in their bed and she passes out.
Wow.
The next day, Ron comes home and he can see blood on the stoop. And he goes inside the house and he can see blood on the carpet. And he rushes through their home and he finds Donna on the bed. She has a huge hole in her head and she can't even speak.
Wow.
He calls 911. They take Donna to the hospital, but police ask for Ron to stay behind at the crime scene because they want to ask some questions. Now, if that was you, you would have been like,
yeah,
screw that, I'm going.
Y'all going to have to chase me to the
You're going to have to
hospital.
follow me to the hospital.
Yeah.
And I think Ron felt the same way.
Yeah.
They didn't keep him very long because they realized, well, he couldn't have done this because he's been in the air.
Right.
Police go through the home, and inside the garage on the passenger side of the car, they find this humongous pool of blood. And they can see blood inside the car, and a bloody ball-peen hammer was lying in the driver's side seat.
So he's just leaving the hammers
Leaving
behind.
the hammers behind.
Wow.
They dust this condominium for prints. They take all the evidence they find. They do have a smudge of a fingerprint that doesn't belong to Ron or Donna, but it's not enough to match anything.
Okay.
Of course, there's no forced entry, so they think as soon as the garage door opened, he slipped inside, he waited for her to open the door to her car, and then he struck. And there's blood going up the stairs and into the bathroom and the bedroom, but that's all Donna dragging herself around the house. She would try to walk and fall over and over again before she got to the bed.
Wow.
At the hospital, doctors tell the police she's been sexually assaulted. And she has this terrible trauma to her head. She's completely confused as to what happened to her. And when the detective and the hospital therapist go to her and they're telling her about the assault, she starts crying, but not for herself. She thought they were talking about somebody else. She was like, this poor girl. What happened to this poor girl?
Wow.
She'd been raped and attacked, and they had to be like, Donna, we're talking about you. This story runs in the paper that Donna is still alive. And Ron is worried that this asshole might come back and finish the job.
Right.
So he borrows a gun and he sleeps at the foot of Donna's hospital bed for 2 days until they give her police protection.
Wow.
Now, today, you couldn't get a firearm into a hospital if you tried.
Yeah, different times.
On January 12th, 2 days after both Donna and Patricia are assaulted and Patricia is murdered, Lakewood police asked Patricia's daughter, Sherry, to come into the station. They fingerprinted everybody who lived in the house so they could distinguish the killer from the people who lived there.
Right.
And the police then tell Sherry that her mom, Patricia, had been raped and murdered. They ask if her mom had any enemies, and Sherry does give police 4 names of people in Nebraska, including a person who actually blamed Patricia for an impending divorce. Now, I don't know if that was Sherry's husband or not, but police did speak with him, and they look at this circle of 4 people in Nebraska that Sherry tells them about, but nothing pans out because everybody had an alibi.
Okay.
And not only that, all the other leads are drying up fast in Patricia's murder case. January 15th, 1984, Aurora, Colorado. Bruce and Debra Bennett are a young couple with 2 young daughters. They had just moved into their brand new home a couple months before. Every single one of these victims, these families, they had just moved into what?
Well, I'm assuming they had garage doors, but it also sounds like they were all brand new.
All moving into brand new builds, brand new homes, brand new townhomes. And the Bennetts had just moved into their new home just a couple months before. Bruce Allen Bennett was born on April 22nd, 1956 in Denver, Colorado. He was a Navy vet, and he met and married Debra Lynn Large. They got married in 1976. Debra was born on April 9th, 1957 in Torrance, California. In 1976, they have the first of their two daughters, Melissa Marie Bennett, who was born on January 17th, 1976 in Hawaii. So I don't know if Bruce was still in the military and stationed in Hawaii when Melissa was born or not.
Yeah.
But another daughter, Vanessa, joins the family just a few years later in 1980.
Okay.
On the night before, January 14th, family had gathered at their home, including Bruce's two brothers, to celebrate Melissa's 9th birthday. Melissa attended Fulton Elementary, where she was in 2nd grade. She was an exceptional student, according to her principal. When the two brothers leave the house, they notice that the garage door is
open.
Wow. So one of them goes back in the house and kind of yells, "Hey, your garage door is open," right? I mean,
Right.
Today we would call on our cell phone. Your garage door is open.
Exactly.
Shut that. Yeah.
Actually, you just push a button on your cell phone and shut the door.
Not if you're the brothers.
Okay.
But sometime during this night, Bruce, Debra, Melissa, and Vanessa are all attacked. It appears that Bruce and Melissa were attacked in bed. Bruce tried to fight off the assailant and is bludgeoned in the head at the top of the stairs of this 2-story home. He falls down the stairs, breaking off spindles as he goes. At the bottom of the steps, the killer then slits Bruce's throat with a butcher knife from their kitchen, from the Bennett's kitchen.
So he's getting a little more brutal.
Well, I think what happened is Bruce actually fought him. He's a Navy man, He's in the Navy Reserves, and he's in the reserves, and he's just like, I'm not going down without a fight. I'm going to protect my family.
Sure.
So he gets to the bottom of the stairs, and he's been hit in the head. And just to keep him from coming back to life, he slits his throat. Bruce's wife, Debra, is pulled to the front of the bed and struck in the head with a hammer. My thought is that he did this first, and then Bruce woke up and he had to fight him off.
Right.
Debra is sexually assaulted and left on the side of the bed, naked from the waist up. Then the killer moves to the next bedroom, where their two little twin beds are holding 9-year-old Melissa and 4-year-old Vanessa.
Wow.
Melissa is bludgeoned with the hammer, but she's tried to fight him off because she has a cut in her hand from the knife he used to slit the throat of Bruce. The killer cuts off her pajamas with the knife, beats her with the hammer, and sexually assaults her. He leaves her naked and on her back with her hands above her head. Then he goes after 4-year-old Vanessa. She is struck numerous times and is also sexually assaulted. Then the killer ransacks Bruce and Debra's bedroom and leaves. The next day, Bruce and Debra don't show up for work. They both work at the exact same place, the Backstrom Wholesale Furniture Company. I think he was in sales. I know she was an interior designer.
Right.
And when they don't show up for work, they call Bruce's mom, Connie. And Connie calls the house, but there's no answer. So she decides to drive over. And when she gets there, she can see that the garage door is open and both cars are still inside. And as she got closer to the house, she could see Debra's purse is dumped out right in front of the house in the snow. And the door from the garage into the kitchen is also open. It's not wide open, but it's open.
Right.
She gets just a couple feet into this house, and that's when she sees her son, Bruce, at the bottom of the stairs, covered in blood.
I can't imagine.
She calls 911, and Officer Marvin Brandt gets to the Bennett's house, and he can see blood is everywhere. As soon as he walks through the door, he sees Bruce's body at the bottom of the stairs. He's got blunt force trauma to his head. His throat is cut. There's a bloody handprint on the wall at the top of the stairs. He gets deeper into the house and he finds Debra Bennett lying beside the bed, covered in blood and naked from the waist up. On the carpet beside her is a bloody imprint of a claw hammer. So not the hammer itself,
right,
but the hammer is so covered in blood that when the killer sets it down, it makes the perfect imprint of blood of a hammer. And you can even see that it's a claw hammer.
Man.
The bedroom was ransacked. It looked like it was a robbery gone wrong, maybe. But then the police go to the next room and they find these twin beds that are unmade, and the bedding is pulled off into the floor. There's blood everywhere, and on the floor is little Melissa, bludgeoned in the head. They keep looking and they find tiny little Vanessa, who is wedged between the bed and the wall. Yeah. She's been hit numerous times, but somehow she is still alive.
Really?
And next to her is a blood-soaked teddy bear. And if that doesn't break your heart, I don't know what will.
Wow.
They whisk her off to the hospital, and the EMTs tell the police, she's probably not going to make it. We're going to do our best to keep her alive to get her there, but she's probably going to be DOA.
Right.
In the girl's bedroom, they find semen on the bedspread, in the floor, and on Vanessa, and a partial bloody footprint. And under Melissa, they find a utility knife. Now, when they search the house, they find Debra's purse outside, which Connie had already found.
Right.
His mom had already found that.
Sure.
And the cash is gone, but nothing else is really missing. And on the front lawn, they find a butcher knife from the Bennett's kitchen. Now, there's no forced entry into the home. He came through the open garage and into the house. And police have no suspects, and no one had answers.
Right.
Bruce was a really well-liked guy with no enemies. He was this military reservist. She was like the perfect mom who wanted everything for these two girls. But this crime scene is so awful that veteran police officers have a hard time being there.
Man.
They can't be there. There's blood literally all over the place. There is cast off everywhere. But they're trying to protect the integrity of this crime scene because with this much blood and this many bodies, surely this asshole left something behind.
Right.
So they send the prints that they find to AFIS, which is Automatic Fingerprint Identification System. It's 1984. Just want to keep reminding you that.
That was relatively new at that time, wasn't it?
Yeah, and there's no match.
Right.
There are no fingerprints on the knife, so he's obviously wearing gloves.
Right.
They send carpet samples to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, which is like the state FBI.
Right.
Because on the carpet there is semen. And the media picks up on this story. Hard not to, when this whole family has just been murdered, just slaughtered, and there's a young child fighting for her life.
Right.
And this, along with the attack on Kim and Jim Hobbenshields, the attack on Donna Dixon, and the murder of Patricia Smith, people are worried.
Sure.
People were hyper vigilant about shutting their garage door and locking their doors and windows tightly.
I would think so.
There were actually people sleeping in helmets because they were so afraid someone would try to beat them in the head with a hammer in their sleep. And police said that there were even people sitting in their garages waiting with a gun in their lap. By the way, gun sales skyrocketed in this area.
Sure they did.
Finally, Aurora and Lakewood police get together for a chat. They've been too wrapped up in the murders in their own towns to be looking at the details of murders in another town. And these have happened one on top of the other on top of the other. And they realized that Patricia Smith's murder could be related because the killer came in through the garage and murdered with a hammer and sexually assaulted. Because remember, the others lived.
Right.
They were assaulted, but not murdered.
Right.
Police realized the killer's striking about every week for the past 3 weeks. And week 4 was coming in fast, buddy. Little 4-year-old Vanessa will survive. Her jaw was shattered and her skull fractured. Both arms were hit. One was broken. She also suffered a shattered pelvis. She was in a coma, but when she woke up, she knew who she was and who her family was. But she would have to learn how to do absolutely everything again, including walking.
Yep.
And the same was true of Donna Dixon, the flight attendant who was assaulted and left for dead. She had to learn how to do everything all over again. Now, the police are under a ton of pressure to bring the killer in. They asked the public for their help, and the tips started rolling in, but everybody they got a tip about had an alibi. So no fingerprint matches from the scene. And even though they have semen, there's still no DNA at the time.
Right.
All they know is that this killer has blood type A.
And that's it.
And that's it.
Wow.
Do you know your blood type?
It's so funny. I don't. I mean, I should.
You should.
Yeah. I just don't remember.
I'm B positive.
Yeah.
Just in case anybody wants to know.
I'm just positive.
You are positive, and I need to be positive more. But it's at this point, when they have absolutely nothing, that an FBI profiler is called in. They get him all the crime scene photos and information. They overnight it all to Quantico, where profiler Ron Walker starts going through everything.
Okay.
And here's what he came up with.
All right.
Quote, he's not some criminal mastermind. He's a punk. He's a psycho. He's not looking for a particular victim. He's looking for people.
Opportunity.
Yeah. Ron Walker arrived in Colorado on January 24th, 1984, and spent 2 weeks interviewing the Aurora and Lakewood detectives and reading police and forensic reports. He believed that not only was the Hammer killer responsible for the 4 high-publicity murders of the Bennett family and Patricia Smith, but also the 3 survivors who were beaten in their homes in what he called, quote, blitz attacks, meaning Kim and Jim and Donna Dixon.
Right.
Agent Walker found similarities in each of the 4 attacks. In each case, the attacker stole cash or items that were easy to convert into cash while leaving much more valuable items, including diamond rings, credit cards, TVs, radios, and checkbooks, behind.
Things that could be traced.
Agent Walker's profile described the attacker as an unsophisticated burglar without the skills common to prolific burglars who specialized in identity theft or the sources to pawn upper-end possessions like guns and TVs into more money.
Right.
Quote, he doesn't have a way to fence jewelry, end quote.
Okay.
So he's an amateur. That's what he's saying.
Right.
He wrote in his profile that the suspect would have a criminal record for trespassing, burglary, and car theft, in which cash was his primary target, and his profile recommended that police scour criminal records for cat burglaries. And it could be that a fingerprint was left on a door or a window in a nonviolent burglary that could actually lead investigators to their killer.
Okay.
Quote, by no means was the Hammer killer sophisticated enough to pick locks or use glass cutters to enter homes. Instead, he went into areas he was familiar with and went from home to home, either trying doors or looking at windows and doors to see if they were open.
Okay.
Then he would immediately go on to the next resident. He was very juvenile in his approach, end quote. And again, how does he gain entry into these homes? Open doors or garages?
Yeah.
And his profile recommends that detectives look for a very young man in his early to mid-20s. He was probably white and not very smart. He got a thrill from it, and then he took it to the next level and lost his mind with the Bennett family. He's working his way into becoming a serial killer.
Wow.
But this killer's not a stalker who watched like a neighborhood for hours or a person for hours or days or weeks until he knew all the habits of his victims. He was just a prowler who would randomly target homes in areas where he knew the area.
Right. It's like I said before, it was just a crime of opportunity.
It's a crime of opportunity, but his profile said that he either knew the area because he lived there or he worked there.
Ah, okay.
Possibly in construction.
Oh, wow. That's pretty
How
pretty
about
descriptive.
That? Yeah. I mean, all the attacks happened in areas of new construction, and they were all carried out with a hammer.
But the one hammer was a body shop hammer.
True.
Yeah.
This is true.
Yeah.
But most importantly, Agent Walker predicted that the attacker's background would include acts of violence, whether he was the victim or the perpetrator. Like maybe he was a victim of child abuse. We don't know that because we don't know that much about his upbringing.
Right.
Or maybe he'd been beaten up while he was trying to burglarize a home and it was never reported to the police because the person like beat up the guy who tried to get into their house and just didn't want to deal with police.
Sure.
He's an opportunist.
Right.
So maybe his driving or walking around a neighborhood with gloves and a hammer on him. That's his MO. He's just going to walk around and he's got these things on him.
Right.
He caught all of these people by surprise, so they couldn't fight back. But the one thing he knows is he's going to continue to kill.
Of course.
Police ask all around these new construction areas, but subcontractors weren't really kept track of, and sometimes they were actually paid in cash. And these guys just went from site to site. And police went through pages of the workers that they could get their hands on, but nothing panned out. And still they thought if he worked construction, he might know the layout of these homes too.
Right.
But this case is going cold. Then on January 27th, 12 days after Bruce, Debra, and Melissa Bennett are murdered, 900 miles away in Kingman, Arizona, Roy Williams is asleep in his bed when someone comes through the back door of his home and is standing over him with a 25-pound rock in the air.
Oh, man.
He then feels this bang on his head, and then the rock is raised and dropped again, this time on his stomach, cracking Roy's rib.
Wow.
The attacker ran away. Roy can't give a description to the police because it was so dark.
Right.
Police search the area, and they don't find anyone, but what they do find is a shoe print in Roy's yard that isn't Roy's. It's a size 9 tennis shoe with an odd pattern on the bottom. So police put out an APB, and 7 hours later, an officer is driving along the interstate near Roy's place and sees a hitchhiker on the side of the road. He pulls over and he asks him some questions, and then he asks to see the bottom of his shoes. He wants to see the pattern. And when he flips his shoe over and this officer sees that the pattern on the bottom of his tennis shoes matches the pattern that was left,
Yep.
he wants to question him.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a few questions.
Yeah.
He runs away. As soon as the officer says, yeah, I just got a couple questions for you, he runs away, realizing, oh, they know that the bottom, I've left a track somewhere.
The jig is up.
Yeah, so he runs away. And 30 minutes later, after they start looking for him, they find him hiding behind a bush. It's Alex Christopher Ewing, a 23-year-old drifter who works in construction.
No.
They charge him with burglary and attempted murder, but the Mojave jail is overcrowded, so they had to send him to Nevada to be housed.
Okay.
9 months later, on August 9th, 1984, a prisoner transportation van that is traveling from Nevada to Arizona stops at a gas station in Henderson, Nevada. This is just right outside of Las Vegas.
Okay.
They stop at this gas station, and the guards unshackle the prisoners so they can take a bathroom break. But they turn their backs, and Alex makes a run for it. He goes out the back of this Texaco station and across a parking lot and into a Kmart.
Okay.
And they don't realize it until another prisoner is telling the guards, hey,
Yo, dude.
Alex is escaping.
Yeah.
So they call the Henderson Police Department, and Utah Chambers just happened to be working the graveyard shift that night. She's told by her sergeant that there's been a prisoner escape. Okay. He's white, early 20s, and all he is wearing is red shorts and a pair of tennis shoes. And the hunt is on. They thought, this guy's just a burglary suspect, so he's probably not too dangerous, right. But he is an escapee, so what's he willing to do to keep from being arrested again?
Sure.
They search for hours and come up with nothing. There's no sign of Alex, and it's about to hit a dead end. But then they got a call from a woman in Nevada that had a man on her front porch trying to get into her house. He's knocking on her door and saying, please let me in. I need to call a tow truck. So remember, it's 1984, no phones.
Sure.
And, when I was growing up, I can remember people knocking on we had an ice storm, and one of the utility guys ran into our yard, and he ended up on our front porch knocking on the door. I got to call my boss. Yeah?
Yeah.
So she sees him through the window, and she thought he looked hanky wearing only red shorts and tennis shoes.
Yep.
And she says, no, sir. Yeah, I'm not opening the door.
Right.
But she also called the police. And when they arrive, they can't find him anywhere. He's now been out in the desert for 2 days on the run in nothing but red shorts and tennis shoes.
Wow. Hope he's not a redhead.
He's not. He's blonde. He's kind of blonde.
Yeah.
An hour later, police get another call from Nancy Berry saying that a man had clubbed her and her husband Chris in the head and that they were bleeding.
Wow.
Quote, "This guy came in with a club. He started hitting me on the head and we're bleeding to death." This is the 911 call.
Wow.
And when the dispatcher asks, "Is the guy still in the house?" she says, quote, "I don't know. I think so," end quote. And the 911 operator gets an address and keeps her on the line. And she's saying, quote, "We're dying. We're dying." I've heard this 911 call. And then the 911 operator asks, quote, "Do you need an ambulance?" end quote.
No, we're just dying.
What?
Are you serious?
I mean, she says from the get-go she's been bludgeoned in the head. And she's telling them, "We're bleeding to death." And she's actually saying, "My husband's eyes are closed." Like, she's worried. She's like, "We're dying here."
Jeez.
Henderson, Nevada police are on their way. They're running lights and sirens. They get to Chris and Nancy Berry's house. They rush in with guns drawn. They can hear screaming from the inside. And Officer Chambers runs into the master bedroom where the screaming's coming from. There's blood everywhere, all over the bed, all over both of them. And both of Nancy's arms are broken.
Wow.
And Chris, her husband, had been severely beaten. So they get them off with EMTs. They sweep the house. They find a broken axe handle covered in blood.
Man.
But their concern is their 2 young children who are also in this house.
Right.
Police go into the bedrooms of the kids. There's a baby and a 2-year-old, and they are both unharmed. They're just fine. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
The Berrys give the police department as much information as they can. Nancy heard a noise. She went down the hallway to the kitchen, and when she gets there, she sees a white male standing in her kitchen.
Oh, no.
Yeah. She turns and runs toward her bedroom. She's yelling at her husband to call the police. Alex chases her down the hallway, and he's wielding this axe handle and swinging it with everything he's got, all his might.
Wow.
Chris Berry sits up in bed, and the first blow was right across his forehead. Then he's hit twice in the back of the head. And Nancy reaches for the phone, and he hit her. And in all this confusion of her calling 911, Chris and Nancy are both screaming. He runs away. But he drops the axe handle that he had used to bludgeon them both. He's always leaving his weapon behind.
But I'm guessing this time he doesn't have gloves on.
This time he doesn't have gloves. All he's got is red shorts and tennis shoes, remember?
Right. Yep.
And I'm assuming that maybe he's in the kitchen. Why? Probably thirsty and hungry.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nancy and Chris are taken to the hospital, and the kids go to a neighbor's home. The police are everywhere looking for Alex. They're out there everywhere looking for this dude. He went out the back, north toward the mountains and toward the desert, and they went door to door looking for him. The only thing they find are his footprints, which they track for several miles walking toward Las Vegas. They ramp up the search. Now they're helicopters. They get the dogs out. They can't find him. They release a description of Alex and ask for tips. They release this to the media and the public, and they tell people, lock up your doors tight.
Right.
Then Alex gets desperate. He finds a payphone. Again, it's 1984. There's a payphone out there.
What is that thing that you were talking about?
I know. He finds a payphone and he tries to make a collect call to his brother. That's the only way you could use a payphone.
Right.
Get the operator. You want to make a collect call.
Yep.
And this operator overhears him tell his brother about his prison escape. And she's seen all this media coverage about an escaped prisoner.
Uh-oh.
And she calls the police and lets them know exactly where this payphone is located.
Awesome. That's great.
It is in Lake Mead. It's at Lake Mead. And this is a park ranger's jurisdiction. So police call the park rangers, who swoop in to that payphone. And one of the park rangers ran down Alex. He chased him down. This park ranger is 6'6". Alex is 5'4".
I think the park ranger stride's a little bit bigger.
Yes, he had such a long stride. He ran, he caught up with him. He couldn't shoot him. They couldn't shoot him. He was only wearing red shorts and tennis shoes and was clearly not armed. It was about a 400-yard foot chase, apparently.
Right.
And Alex falls. He surrenders. And apparently he was just like, I'm done. Take me. Take me.
Yeah.
He's severely dehydrated. He's sunburnt. He's been out in the desert where it had been 110 degrees.
Yeah.
And now Alex has attempted murder charges on top of the assault with a deadly weapon charges, all in Nevada, stemming from the attacks on Chris and Nancy Berry and Roy Williams, who he hit with the big chunk of rock.
Rock, right.
On September 12th, 1984, he's charged with 2 counts of attempted murder, 2 counts of battery with deadly weapon, and escape, and burglary. And on February 2nd, 1985, Alex is found guilty of all counts except one and is sentenced to 110 years.
Wow.
Meanwhile, back in Colorado, police have bupkis. And the victims and their families are trying to get on with their lives. 5 months after Donna Dixon's attack, Ron asks her to marry him, and she became Donna Holm.
No.
And she would marry him wearing a wig because her head was still shaved. And she was still in the throes of rehab. Again, these two are so cute.
Right.
She said that he wouldn't let her feel sorry for herself and that he always made her laugh. What do I always say about you?
You make me laugh.
You make me laugh. Jim and Kim Hobbenshields, they move out of their new dream home in May of 1986. These were the first 2 people that I told you about that were attacked.
Right.
They both lived. They ended up divorcing eventually. Little Vanessa went to live with her grandmother, but her life was going to be anything but easy. As she grows up, she's going to be suicidal. She's going to develop a drug and alcohol problem and is eventually going to become homeless and a heroin addict.
Oh, man.
But after the murders of the Bennetts, the attacks stop. After the family's murdered, after Vanessa's parents and sister are murdered, everything stops.
Right.
In 1986, a man named Melvin Brandt takes over the cases in Aurora. And the only lead they have is the semen samples taken in the girl's bedroom and on the carpet and from Melissa. And still in 1985, there's no DNA testing, but they know he's type A blood. And when he starts peeling away the layers of this case, he actually discovers that there was some evidence that was overlooked. It was a blonde pubic hair that was found in Melissa's pajamas.
Oh.
This is the little girl.
Right.
They send it to California for some newfangled kind of testing where there's a possibility they might destroy this hair trying to get any sort of DNA sequence out of it.
Right.
But they take this risk. And they do destroy the hair, and they don't really get anything out of it. And every year, these police officers speak with these families of the victims, letting them know, we're still working on this case.
Right.
17 years later, on March 1st, 2001, the Aurora police get some news from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. Their DNA lab had finally generated a full genetic sequence from the blood that was gathered and sent for analysis.
This is 17 years later.
17 years later.
Wow.
They ran the DNA through CODIS, which is the National DNA Data Bank for felons, and it comes back with 0.
Really?
Nobody.
Wow.
And here's why. Nevada was really behind in their DNA swabs of their inmates.
Wow.
And in fact, their legislature had to get involved to make it happen. Yeah, in 2013, the state of Nevada will finally mandate that all felons need to submit DNA samples.
And not a moment too soon.
And not a moment too soon.
Jeez.
And 3 years later, the state attorney general applied the rule retroactively to current prisoners, regardless of what they were convicted of. They didn't care. They
Right.
want their DNA.
Sure.
In 2016, the DNA found at the crime scene of the Bennett family is sent to Parabond Nanolabs. And Colleen Fitzpatrick, we've talked about her before, she creates an illustration using the same method they used when they were profiling the Golden State Killer.
Okay.
And it comes back. There's a profile, looks just like Alex. I'll post a picture of it in the In-Laws and Outlaws.
Okay.
But his butt is sitting in the Nevada State Prison, right?
Right.
In 2018, it was announced that Alex Christopher Ewing's DNA matched the DNA collected from Patricia Smith as well, and the Bennett family crime scenes.
Okay.
Now, by this time, when the new detective is on the case, I mean, it's been all these years later, these guys have retired.
Yeah.
So this guy, his name is Detective Connor, he contacts the Nevada Department of Corrections, and he wants to find out where you got Alex. Where is he? 'Cause
Right.
we got some information.
Right.
And what he finds out is that Alex is up for parole.
Oh, geez.
Alex is getting ready to leave. He's getting prepared for the outside world. So much so, he set up a dating profile
Jeez.
for when he gets out.
Getting his swinging arm ready, too.
He wanted a woman 50 years or older who was athletic, loved outdoors and camping.
Wow.
So he's up for parole. And now the race is on to get him back to Colorado so he can face justice. He has to be extradited.
Yeah.
July 12th, 2018, Detective Connor and John Kilner, who is the DA, they go to Northern Nevada Correctional Center to ask Alex some questions. They thought he'd be this big, strong monster.
Yeah.
And they see this guy they've been looking for 34 years. He walks through the door and he's 5'4".
Jeez.
And they thought at first he was pretending to be just a frail old man. But he's just like short and...
But he is a frail old man.
He's a frail old man.
Yeah.
And according to the FBI profiler, he ain't got a brain in him.
Right,
So
right.
Now these two hold their cards very close to the vest when they're talking to him. They said they were with another agency that wasn't a part of the Nevada Department of Corrections. And he kind of relaxes a little bit. Oh, they're not from Nevada. What can go wrong here?
Right.
So they ask him some questions about his early life, and he says growing up, his dad was in the Air Force and his family moved around a lot, that he dropped out of high school. He does tell them that he had spinal meningitis and a near-death experience, and it changed his personality. And when he told them he'd been in Colorado, they're like, well, what, where in Colorado? And when were you in Colorado?
Let me put my red flag up.
Now, I mean, obviously they know that he's been there.
Sure.
But when he says it, they're like, oh, no, okay, we're on to something.
Right.
At first he said he was there for a little while and then he left. He was there for a year working construction jobs, working on new homes in both Aurora and Lakewood, Colorado.
Jeez.
The weapons were from his trade of construction, and the FBI profile was spot on, and he didn't even suspect until they told him, look, Alex, the jig is up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when they do, he explodes. And they say to him, quote, I know you know what we're talking about, end quote. And Alex was so upset that they had actually caught up with him 34 years later when he's ready for parole and he's got his dating profile all set up.
I'm sorry, Alex, but we're going to have to delay your dating profile.
Yeah, because now he's going to get hit with murder charges.
Yeah.
And he had only been in for attempted murder because in Nevada, he didn't kill anybody, remember?
Right.
So detectives run his DNA one more time just to make sure it's a match.
Right.
And then they called the victims' families. On August 7th, 2018, they say, we've got him. He's in prison in Nevada. And honestly, most of the people that he actually assaulted who were still alive and families of the people that he killed, they all thought this guy has to be dead. It's been 34 years.
Sure.
34 years.
Yeah.
But they say, we've got him. So by this point, Vanessa Bennett, the little girl who survived, is living under a bridge in Tucson. And they tell Bruce's mom, Connie Bennett, who found the family that night, that they'd ID'd the killer and that they were going to bring him back to Colorado. But the DA has a task ahead of him.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Because of the statute of limitations.
Right.
Jim and Kim, the very first people who were attacked, that was aggravated assault. And Donna Dixon, the little flight attendant, her attack, also aggravated assault.
Right.
These are both past the statute of limitations.
Okay.
Including the Bennett's aggravated assault charge. There's still the charge of murder, but the aggravated assault charge, that's gone.
Right.
On August 9th, 2018, the DA flies out with an arrest warrant for Alex with the Arapahoe County District Court, and his prosecution is all about the Bennett murders and how Vanessa was left without a family and how he had sexually assaulted and murdered her little sister, Melissa. The case against Alex for Patricia Smith would be a separate trial. They have to extradite him back to Colorado. Okay. But Alex gets himself an attorney to contest the extradition. And he fights this in court with all the legal red tape for 2 years, all the way up to the Nevada Supreme Court. And he even tried to seek a review by the United States Supreme Court.
Wow.
And every time he tried to stay out of Colorado, he failed. And they finally brought his ass back.
Okay.
And DA John Kellner decides to personally prosecute the case on behalf of these families.
Good.
And in pretrial hearings, the judge blocks the inclusion of the other attacks. Anything he'd done in Nevada or Arizona is out. And the attacks against Donna Dixon Holm and Kim and Jim Habenchild were also out.
Really?
But they could talk about Patricia Smith's murder, and that case was upcoming.
Okay.
The prosecution showed the court his MO, the open garage. He would attack, he would bludgeon with a hammer, and the victim was always sexually assaulted in each of these cases. And Alex Ewing's trial began on July 27th, 2021. Now remember, the first attacks and murders were in 1984. It's now been 36 years. The jurors learn about his past, that when he's 17, his criminal activities began with burglary and theft. And previous arrests, not crimes of opportunity.
Right.
But now he had begun escalating and using crimes of opportunity, and he was turning into a serial killer. And while they're saying all this, Alex is sitting in the courtroom and he is seething. He is so angry because he wants his 50-year-old woman that likes the outdoors and likes camping, right?
Yep.
Alex's attorney argues that the DNA from 1984 has been mishandled and contaminated. So this is their whole argument, that the chain of custody had been broken, that everything was contaminated.
Okay.
They wanted to know how it was being stored at the police department. They wanted to talk about the pubic hair that they sent out for testing that was destroyed. And his attorney says there's no way to say who it really belonged to. In 1984, there's no DNA, and they handled evidence without gloves, and that is true. But one thing he cannot explain away is the semen he left behind.
Right.
So how did he get there? If he wasn't there, why was his DNA there?
Right.
At 87 years old, even Bruce Bennett's mom, Connie Bennett, she testifies. Remember, she's the one who found her son at the bottom of the stairs.
Sure.
And the jury hears everybody, and they go back in to deliberate, and a day passes, and there's no verdict. And the jury was at an impasse. They send out a note to the judge. We're stuck. So they get new instructions from the judge, which was, try harder.
Good for him.
They deliberated another day and came back, finding him guilty of murder.
Good.
Now, Alex showed no emotion. He didn't flinch. They just shackled him up and took him away. Vanessa Bennett, she read an emotional victim impact statement at the sentencing in August of 2021. Quote, "I'm sober now, but I still can't talk about things, many things, with my family or anybody else for that matter. But all everyone else sees is my anger and my antisocial behavior. I didn't just lose my parents and my sister. I lost my trust in people and my dignity and pride. I lost the person I was supposed to be, end quote.
That's so sad.
Alex Ewing was convicted on 6 counts related to the murders of Bruce Bennett, Debra Bennett, and their daughter, Melissa Bennett. During sentencing for the murders, Arapahoe County District Court Judge Darren Vale addressed Ewing's level of violence. He looked at Alex and said, quote, "Over a 12-day span, you inflicted an unspeakable orgy of violence. Your actions, and by imputation, you in 1984 are an abomination," end quote.
Good.
2 months later, in October of 2021, Alex goes on trial for the murder of Patricia Smith. But the day after the opening statements are made, the judge declared a mistrial after the defense team filed a motion saying that Alex wasn't competent to stand trial. Which was really disappointing for Sherry, her mom.
Yeah.
There's her daughter.
Where'd that come from?
Yeah.
Wow.
But they took it back to court. But during this trial, Alex doesn't testify. And he says, quote, "I just don't like the idea that if I do say something that attorneys will twist it around. Nothing's been fair. Absolutely. Since I got off the plane. The prosecution rigged the whole thing," end quote.
Wow.
Wah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Then he looks at the judge and says, quote, "Your Honor, I got a lot of issues right now." That's an understatement, Alex.
Yeah.
"I would like to say to this court about this, but I've been treated so unfairly even before I was dragged to this state. The unfairness when I've given information out that could possibly lead to an alternate suspect. I'm told basically to be quiet. Prosecutors here and in Arapahoe are just going to twist it around. You guys don't want the people who actually committed the crimes. You just want the conviction," end quote.
Whatever, Alex.
I mean, your DNA matches what you left behind on Patricia.
Yeah. What don't you understand about that?
Yes, and on April 12th of 2022, Alex Christopher Ewing was convicted of first-degree murder for the death of Patricia Louise Smith and sentenced to life in prison.
Yay.
In issuing her sentence, First Judicial District Judge Tamara Russell said she wished she had the power to do more. The judge advised the family to seek closure within themselves, but not through her sentencing of Ewing. Quote, "I can't replace a loved one. I can't make you feel better," end quote. Mm-hmm. Alex Ewing is currently incarcerated at the Colorado Territorial Correctional Facility.
Okay.
In Colorado.
Yeah.
Where he's going to take his last breath.
Good.
But that is the story of the hammer killer, Alex Ewing. And that's all I have to say about that. For nearly 7 years, Jane Doe has lived in the shadows, her past buried deep beneath layers of secrecy and silence. After completing more than was asked of her in her last assignment for the enigmatic Kaiwolf project, Jane Doe vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of dead bodies and unanswered questions. But now, as the specter of her past returns with a vengeance, Jane finds herself thrust back into a world she thought she'd left behind forever. When her former sins come knocking on her door, Jane is faced with an impossible choice: continue to hide in the shadows, or once again take up arms against the forces that threaten to tear apart the fabric of society. With enemies lurking around every corner and allies who may not be what they seem, Jane must rely on her wits, training, and her unyielding determination to survive. And while trust is a luxury she cannot afford, Jane must confront the truth about herself and her past. As the clock ticks, she realizes that the line between family, friend, and foe are razor thin, and in the end, the only person she can rely on is herself. Jane Doe 4 Charlotte is available September 24th, 2024. No name, no regrets, no mercy.
Well, 36 years later, I guess you could say better late than never.
I mean, it took 36 years for everybody to see justice served.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm just glad he's put away.
Yeah.
Pathetic.
Well, and I think everybody is, because once they realized he was still alive, victims were like, no, like I had finally, you know, been through therapy and I'm over this. And now you're telling me that he's actually alive.
Yeah. Well, and the possibility of parole. Come on.
And they had to face him in court. They had to look at him in court because they came in and gave victim impact statements. Yeah.
I'm just glad there's closure for the families.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
All right. Well, let's move away from that and do a little bless your heart.
Well, bless your heart.
Okay. Number one, I'm going to call this Hang On While I Take Care of This.
I'm hanging.
Okay. All right. Ready? Police in Delaware say a man who robbed a Wilmington bank on Saturday didn't keep the cash for long. After fleeing the Wells Fargo branch, he paused to make a deposit in the ATM outside. Police say McRoberts Williams, a 44-year-old California resident, handed a note to a teller Saturday morning saying a robbery was taking place.
Oh, my gosh.
The 25-year-old woman gave him an undisclosed amount of cash. Williams fled on foot but made a pit stop to make a deposit in the machine on the exterior of the building.
I have nothing.
Officers responded to the scene, found him behind a nearby shopping center, and took him into custody.
Bless his heart. That's all I got.
Yeah, without incident. He was charged with second-degree robbery, a felony with a bond set at $6,000.
There was no stupid clause in there.
Oh, my God.
I mean, bless his heart. Bless his heart.
Yeah. Okay, number two, smile. You're on convict camera.
Okay.
A Cairo area reporter, this is in Egypt, a Cairo area reporter had his phone grabbed from his hands by a thief on a motorbike.
Oh.
But it wasn't, exactly the perfect crime. The reporter had been live streaming a broadcast at the time, and the thief's face was seen by millions.
Oops.
The UM7 news site says its reporter was on a bridge when the phone was taken, the BBC reports. The news reporter had been reporting on an aftermath of an earthquake when viewers suddenly saw the face of the thief.
Oh, my gosh.
Who was smoking a cigarette and looking back nervously as he sped away from the scene. The phone's camera was pointing directly at the man's face during the getaway and wasn't switched off until minutes later.
That's too good.
Some 20,000 people were watching the live stream at the time, and millions more viewed the video of the theft on the site's Facebook page.
I love that.
Yep, the man, to no surprise, was identified and arrested hours after the theft.
Again, bless his heart.
Yep. Number three, and finally.
Yes.
Where the Wind Blows.
Okay.
That's my favorite.
We're already laughing. Okay.
Yeah. A suspect in Missouri wanted for possession of a controlled substance is likely regretting recent food choices after loud farting revealed his hiding spot near Liberty Fox News reports. Quote, if you have a felony warrant, I can't even get through this. Quote, if you have a felony warrant for your arrest, the cops are looking for you, and you pass gas so loud it gives up your hiding spot, you're definitely having and this is on the Post, and they put a poop emoji day. The Clay County Sheriff's Office posted on Facebook. Further details on the case are sparse, but the fart jokes are aplenty.
I'm
Ready?
sure.
Here we go.
Oh, my gosh. Yes, please.
Quote, we've got to give props to the Liberty Police Department for using their senses to sniff him out. Here's another one. Thanks to the at Sheriff Clay County for airing out a wanted person's dirty laundry and fanning the flames. And last but not least, the Liberty Police Department was surprised to see this incident slip out, which stinks for the arrestee.
No.
The city notes that no one was hurt during the incident, either by the gas or resulting arrest.
Oh.
So there you go. So bless his heart.
Bless his heart and his gastrointestinal problems.
Exactly. Oh, mercy me.
Well, if you have a bless your heart or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, all you got to do is go to hitchtohomicide.com, and when you get there, you'll find a pull-down menu.
Yep.
And while you're there, you can also suggest a case or tell us about your brush with true crime.
Please do.
That's my amazing husband out there.
And that's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitch to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.